Back here, CBS12 News at 9. School now back in session. Palm Beach County, the Treasure Coast. School security, of course, always top of mind. With May's massacre at Robb Elementary in Uvalde, Texas, of course, the 2018 shooting at Marjory Stoneman Douglas just down the road. Mass shootings and student safety, of course, hit very close to home.
And students are trained to run, hide, fight in an active shooter situation, but that still leaves developmentally different students dangerously vulnerable.
And right now, we're very lucky to be joining with this discussion Sharon Alexander. She's the CEO of the Unicorn Children's Foundation. Thank you so much for joining us, Sharon.
Thank you for having me this morning.
So, Sharon, talk to us a little bit about your concerns when it comes to developmentally different kids, especially those with autism.
Yeah, so when we talk about run, hide, fight, it really leaves our individuals with developmental, physical, auditory, mobility issues behind. So we need to start thinking about the fact that sometimes those crisis situations, which are unnerving for all of us, particularly for those with autism, they can go into sensory overload, and these are unpredictable routines that we can't prepare them for. So what we need to do is we need to change the acronyms from run, hide, fight to avoid, barricade, and confront, and we need to practice these at least on a quarterly basis so we start building that memory muscle so that when that unexpected happens, they're ready to respond and that the staff is ready to respond.
You said avoid, barricade, and confront. Why is that important to change it to that? So
with the run, hide, fight, running is, for people with mobility issues, they may not be able to run. With avoiding, we can act, the whole point of an active shooter drill is to really buy time for law enforcement or first responders to get there. So the running may not necessarily, if you have somebody with autism who doesn't understand what needs to happen, they don't necessarily divert their attention that quickly. Hiding, obviously, they have difficulty with understanding that they need to be quiet. So the avoiding, developing buddy systems, making sure that first responders understand how to interact when they're entering facilities with vulnerable populations is really important. Barricading, confronting is always the last resort, but it requires really difficult conversations between people with disabilities, service providers, and your first responders.
You just mentioned it. Another concern is when law enforcement does respond and they're interacting with these vulnerable students. If these kids aren't complying with what's going on, how do we better that interaction between law enforcement and these students?
Right. So there, since there were in 2018, I believe there was a shooting of an individual, a caretaker in North Miami, where the young adult was carrying around a toy train, but it was called in as he was carrying a gun, and they thought that the caretaker was at risk or being held hostage. So it's really important that our first responders understand that just because they're not complying with instructions, that it does not mean they're being non-compliant or they're a threat. So by bringing law enforcement and first providers into these facilities so they become aware of the population that is served there, it gives them a different perspective, and they may not be so quick to jump on what would be a normal tip.
You said earlier it was where there's locations where there are vulnerable communities. That is every school, right? There is no school that does not have, students there that are a part of this, vulnerable community. Do you get the feeling like, schools in our area that you know that schools are doing a good job when they are going through their drills? We know that so many of our schools are doing this, that they are also taking care of their vulnerable population.
I think they're doing a good job. We know that since Marjory Stoneman Douglas, 100% of the schools have incorporated that into their training. But I think we can do a better job at making sure that we're including populations with disabilities. And that's why the shift from the run, hide, fight to the avoid, barricade, and confront is, that's a FEMA recommended strategy that was created based on conversations with people with disabilities. So I think it's important that we're really looking at building more inclusive strategies in terms of our active shooter crisis response trainings.
And you are asking law enforcement to join Unicorn Children's Foundation in training officers. What will that training look like?
So we are looking at doing a vulnerability assessment. So we will have first responders coming into our Unicorn Connection Center in Boca, as well as our Unicorn Village Academy. They will look at entryways, exit ways, devise plans and strategies on which way people should exit depending on where they're in the building, or if we can't exit the building, how can we utilize existing furniture or assistive devices to create barricades, and worst case scenario, like how can we turn a cane into some type of device that can help ward off any type of threat.
Sharon Alexander, thank you so much for joining us. Where can people go to find out more about the Unicorn Children's Foundation?
So they can visit us at www.unicornchildrensfoundation.org, or they can give us a call at 561-620-9377.
Such important information, Sharon. Thank you for being here with us this morning.
Thanks,
Thank
Sharon.
you for having me.
All right, coming up next here on CBS 12 News at 9, Serena Williams taking the court.